The message came on a quiet Tuesday morning, when most of Earth was still asleep. It did not arrive as a radio signal or a beam of light. It appeared, suddenly, above every major city on the planet, hanging in the sky like a second sun. The image was of a tall, gray-skinned being, with 6 eyes and a long neck, wearing armor made of black metal. Its voice was deep and cold, and it spoke in perfect English, French, Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, and every other major language on Earth at the same time. "People of Earth," the being said, "I am Grand Marshal Threxen Veo of the Vorthon Galactic Empire. Your world has been surveyed, your resources have been catalogued, your species has been judged. You are hereby ordered to surrender all sovereignty to the Empire within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in the total destruction of your species. This is not a threat, this is a fact. Surrender now, and you may live as subjects. Resist, and you will not live at all." The image vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. For a moment, the whole world was silent. Then the panic began. News channels around the globe scrambled to make sense of what had happened. Governments called emergency sessions. Religious leaders spoke of the end of days. Ordinary people filled the streets, looking up at the sky, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate hoax. But deep underground, in a facility beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. And the people in that room were not panicking. They had been waiting for this moment for almost 40 years. The facility was called Iron Root. Only a few thousand people in the entire world knew it existed. It had been built in secret, funded by a coalition of nations that had come together decades earlier, under a simple, terrifying idea. Humanity was not alone, and someday, something out there would come looking for Earth. That idea had started with a single event in 1987, when a damaged alien scout ship crashed in the Nevada desert. The 3B crew died on impact, but their ship did not. Its computer core survived, and inside that core was a treasure beyond imagination. Knowledge of faster-than-light travel, advanced metallurgy, energy weapons, and the layout of a galaxy far larger and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The nations of Earth had a choice back then. They could reveal what they found and let the world panic, divide, and fight over the technology, or they could work together, in secret, and build something strong enough to protect the whole planet before anyone else found out humanity existed. They chose the second option. It was not easy. There were arguments, betrayals, and years where the project nearly collapsed. But slowly, over 4 decades, Iron Root became the heart of humanity's greatest secret, the war fleet. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the head of the command table, looking at the faces around her. There was General Marcus Webb from the old United States military, Dr. Amara Nwosu, who had led the propulsion research team for 15 years, and Fleet Coordinator Yuki Tanaka, who had spent her whole career designing the ships that now sat hidden in orbital shipyards on the far side of the moon. Beside them sat Aria, the artificial intelligence that had been built using pieces of the crashed alien computer core, now grown into something far more advanced than its origins. "They gave us 72 hours, Chen said. "That is either arrogance or ignorance. Either way, it works in our favor." "Arrogance," Aria said, her voice calm and clear through the room's speakers. "I have analyzed the transmission. The pattern matches known Vorthane first contact protocols. They send this exact message to every species they intend to conquer. In 400 years, no species has ever refused them. They do not expect resistance. They expect surrender." General Webb crossed his arms. "Then let's give them something they don't expect." Dr. Nwosu leaned forward. "The fleet is ready. All 42 capital ships, the escort squadrons, the defense platforms around Earth and Mars. We have been running readiness drills for 6 years. If we are ever going to use this fleet, it is now." Admiral Chen looked around the table one more time. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war on Earth long before any of this began, and who used to say that the worst thing a person could do was wait too long to stand up for what mattered. Sarah had grown up hearing those words, never knowing that one day she would carry the weight of an entire planet's future in her hands. "Get me the President, the Secretary General, and the full Iron Root Council," Chen said. "It's time to tell the world what we've built, and it's time to answer the Empire." 6 hours later, the leaders of Earth's nations sat together in an emergency session of the United Nations. joined by video link with military officials from every continent. Admiral Chen stood before them, along with President Elena Vasquez of the newly formed Terran Defense Coalition, a position created only that morning but planned for decades. For 40 years, Chen said, a secret group of scientists, engineers, and soldiers from every nation on this planet has been building a fleet. We built it because we knew, someday, this day would come. We did not know when, we did not know who would come. But we prepared. She paused, letting the silence settle over the room. The Vorthane Empire believes we are a primitive species. They believe we will surrender, because every other species they have ever contacted has surrendered. They are wrong. We have 42 capital ships in orbital shipyards beyond the moon. We have weapons built from technology far in advance of anything on the surface of this planet. We have pilots and crews who have trained for this exact moment. We are not going to surrender. A murmur went through the room. Some leaders looked afraid. Others looked stunned. A few, who had known about Iron Root for years, simply nodded. What happens if we fight and we lose? Asked the representative from Brazil. What happens to everyone on the surface? That is the risk, Chen admitted. But surrender is not a smaller risk. Every species that has surrendered to the Vorthane has become a slave race, stripped of its resources, its culture erased over generations. We have studied this. We have proof. Surrendering does not save us. It only delays and disguises our destruction. Fighting gives us a chance. Surrendering gives us none. President Vasquez stood beside her. The decision has already been made, in principle, decades ago, by the people who built Iron Root with exactly this moment in mind. But it is right that all of you, as the elected and appointed leaders of this world, have the final say. I ask for a vote. Do we answer the Empire's ultimatum with surrender, or with our fleet? The vote was not unanimous. A handful of nations abstained, still in shock, still afraid. But the overwhelming majority chose to fight. When the final count was read aloud, Admiral Chen felt something settle in her chest, a mixture of pride and terror that she would carry with her for the rest of the war. Then it's decided, she said. Prepare the fleet. Far above the moon's far side, in the shadow of a crater large enough to hide 100 ships, the orbital shipyards of Iron Root came alive. Lights flared across the hulls of massive vessels that had been sitting dormant, waiting, camouflaged from any orbital scans that might catch a glimpse of them. The largest ship in the fleet, the flagship Endeavour, began its final power-up sequence. Its reactor, built using principles adapted from the recovered alien technology but improved by generations of human engineers, roared to life with a hum that could be felt through the ship's hull. Captain James Okafor stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the readouts scroll past him. He was 38 years old, and he had trained for this moment since he was 19, when he had been recruited straight out of flight school by a mysterious government program that promised him the chance to defend something bigger than any single nation. He had not known what that program was until his first day at Iron Root, when they told him about the crashed ship, the alien technology, and the war that was coming. All systems green, Captain, said his weapons officer, Lieutenant Priya Anand. Fleet-wide comms, Okafor said. Patch me through to all captains. A moment later, his voice went out across every ship in the fleet, from the great capital ships down to the smallest fighter squadrons. This is Captain Okafor of the Endeavour. Many of you have trained for this day without knowing if it would ever come. Some of you joined not knowing exactly what you were training for. Today, that changes. The Vorthane Empire has ordered humanity to surrender. We are not going to do that. We are going to show them exactly what this planet is capable of. Stay sharp, trust your training, and remember, we are not fighting for glory. We are fighting for every person on that planet below us, and for everyone who comes after us. Godspeed. Across the fleet, thousands of crew members felt the same mixture of fear and determination that Okafor felt in his own chest. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment that would decide whether humanity took its place among the stars as a free species, or was crushed before it ever had the chance. Back on Earth, the news finally broke. Governments around the world revealed, in carefully worded statements, that a defense fleet had been built in secret and was now ready to respond to the alien ultimatum. The reaction was chaos. Some people cheered. Others were furious that such a secret had been kept for decades. Religious groups debated whether this was humanity's salvation or its doom. But underneath all the noise, something else began to happen. For the first time in history, the entire planet felt like it was facing something together. Old rivalries did not disappear, but they faded, just slightly, in the face of a threat far larger than any conflict between nations. Admiral Chen watched the news coverage from the command center at Ironroot, her eyes tired but focused. Arya's voice came through softly beside her. "Admiral, the Vorthane ultimatum deadline is in 18 hours. Based on their historical patterns, they will likely send a scout force first, to assess our defenses before committing their main fleet. If we destroy the scout force decisively, it may delay their response and give us more time to prepare. If we let it retreat, they will return with overwhelming force." Chen thought about this for a long moment. "What would you do, Arya?" "I am not built to decide matters of war and peace, Admiral. That decision belongs to humanity, but I can tell you this. The Vorthane Empire has never lost a first engagement in 400 years of expansion. If we win this first battle, we will not just be defending Earth, we will be making history." Chen looked out at the images on the screen, the ships gathering in formation beyond the moon, the crews preparing for a battle none of them could fully imagine. She thought about the 72-hour deadline, ticking down toward zero, and the six-eyed being, who had promised destruction if humanity did not kneel. "Let them come," she said quietly. "Let's show them what Earth can do." 11 hours before the deadline, the first sensors detected movement at the edge of the solar system. A Vorthane scout fleet, 5 ships strong, had dropped out of faster-than-light travel, just beyond the orbit of Neptune. They were not the full invasion force. They were exactly what Arya had predicted, a probe, sent to test the waters, to see if the primitive humans had any real means of defense before the true fleet arrived to crush them. The scout ships were sleek and dark, built for speed rather than heavy combat, bristling with sensors, designed to catalog every detail of Earth's defenses. Their commander, a young and ambitious officer named Vec Doran, had been given strict orders: observe, record, and report back. Under no circumstances was he to engage in combat unless directly threatened. The Empire wanted information, not casualties, at this early stage. But as the scout fleet moved closer to Earth, sweeping their sensors across the solar system, they picked up something that made Vec Doran's 6 eyes widen in disbelief. Dozens of large energy signatures, arranged in careful formation, hidden in the shadow of the moon's far side. Ships, many ships. Ships with power signatures that, according to his sensors, rivaled anything in the Vorthane fleet itself. "That is not possible," Doran muttered to his second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Sela Krath. The survey reports said this species had barely mastered basic orbital flight. "Perhaps the survey reports were wrong," Krath said grimly. "Sir, I recommend we withdraw immediately and report this to Grand Marshal Threxen Val." Doran hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn around, to retreat back into the void, and let the Empire's true might handle whatever this planet had built. But ambition, and perhaps a touch of arrogance bred by 400 years of unbroken Vorthane dominance, made him pause. "Move us closer," he ordered. "I want a full sensor sweep before we report anything. If this species has built something dangerous, the Empire will want exact numbers, not guesses." It was a decision that would prove fatal. As the scout fleet crept closer, into the outer edges of the solar system, Admiral Chen watched their approach from the command center, her heart pounding steadily in her chest. On the massive display before her, the 5 Vorthane ships glowed like small red lights, drifting slowly toward the heart of human space. "They're testing us," General Webb said beside her, "trying to see what we've got before the real fleet shows up." "Then let's give them a good look," Chen said. She turned to the communications officer. "Patch me through to Captain Okafor." A moment later, Okafor's face appeared on a smaller screen, steady and calm, despite the tension visible in his eyes. "Admiral," he said. "James," Chen said, using his first name for what might be the last peaceful moment either of them would have for a long time. "The scouts are entering weapons range in approximately 40 minutes. I want you to take the Endeavour and the 2nd Fleet Squadron to intercept them before they get close enough to fully map our defenses. Do not let them retreat with detailed data. If possible, destroy or disable all 5 ships." "Understood, Admiral." Okafor's jaw tightened. "This is really happening." It's really happening, Chen confirmed. 40 years of preparation comes down to what happens in the next hour. Make it count. Okafor nodded once, then turned to give the order that would launch humanity's first battle against the Vorthane Empire. Across the fleet, alarms began to sound. Crews rushed to their stations. Fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and pride. The Endeavour and 12 escort ships began to move, sliding silently out from behind the moon's shadow, engines glowing as they accelerated toward the incoming Vorthane scouts. Vectoran's sensors picked up the movement almost immediately. His 6 eyes widened again as he watched 13 human ships break formation and begin an intercept course directly toward his small scout fleet. "They're coming for us," Krath said, disbelief clear in her voice. "They actually mean to fight." "Evasive maneuvers," Doran ordered, finally understanding the danger he had put his ships in. "Full reverse. Prepare to jump to faster than light the moment we clear the gravity well interference from their moon." But it was too late. The human ships were faster than anything in the Vorthane sensor database had predicted, closing the distance with a speed that defied every assumption the Empire had made about this primitive, backward species. As the range closed to within weapons distance, Captain Okafor gave the order that would echo through history, as the opening shot of humanity's war for survival. Fire. The Endeavour's main batteries lit up the darkness of space, streaks of energy lancing out toward the fleeing Vorthane scout ships. The first shots missed, the enemy ships weaving and dodging with practiced skill. But the human fleet had trained for this moment for years, running thousands of simulated engagements, refining their targeting systems, learning the theoretical weaknesses of Vorthane ship design from the data recovered off that crashed scout ship decades earlier. The second wave of fire found its mark. One of the 5 scout ships shuddered and broke apart in a silent flash of light, debris scattering into the void. Vectoran watched in horror as his fleet, which he had believed to be simply gathering routine reconnaissance, was being systematically destroyed by a species the Empire had judged too primitive to pose any threat at all. "Jump now," he screamed at his pilot. "Jump now. Get us out of here." 2 of the remaining 4 ships managed to escape into faster-than-light travel, vanishing in flashes of distorted light, carrying with them terrifying new information for the Empire. But the other 2 were not so fortunate. Human fighter squadrons, small and fast, swarmed around them, cutting off their escape routes, disabling their engines with precise, coordinated fire. Within 20 minutes, the battle was over. 3 Vorthane scout ships destroyed or disabled, 2 escaped with critical data, and not a single human life lost. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Captain Okafor allowed himself a long, slow breath as the tactical display confirmed the results of the battle. Around him, his crew erupted into quiet, stunned celebration, the tension of the last hour finally breaking. "Admiral," he said into his comm, his voice steady, but filled with something close to disbelief, "the scout fleet has been dealt with. 3 destroyed, 1 disabled and captured, 2 escaped." On the other end of the line, in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Chen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. "Good work, Captain," she said. "But this was just the scouts. The real fleet is coming next, and now they know we can fight back." She looked out at the star map on the wall, at the vast, unknown expanse of the galaxy beyond, filled with an empire that had never lost a war in 400 years. Somewhere out there, Grand Marshal Threxen Vow was about to receive a report that would change everything he believed about the small blue planet called Earth. The 72-hour deadline was still ticking down, and humanity's war for survival had only just begun. Grand Marshal Threxen Vow stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the Endless Dominion. Staring at the report that had just arrived from the surviving scout ships, he read it 3 times, his 6 eyes narrowing further with each pass, before he finally set the datapad down on the table in front of him. "Explain this to me again," he said to Vectoran, whose image trembled slightly on the holographic display, still shaken from the battle he had barely escaped. "You are telling me that a species we classified as pre-interstellar, a species that has not even mastered basic warp theory, according to our own surveys, destroyed 3 of your ships and disabled a 4th. "Yes, Grand Marshal," Doran said, his voice tight with fear. He knew that failure in the Vorthane military was often punished severely, and this was not a small failure. Their ships were faster than our sensors predicted, their weapons were more powerful, and Grand Marshal, they did not hesitate. The moment they detected us, they attacked without warning, without any attempt at communication. Threxen Vow was silent for a long moment. Around him, his senior officers waited nervously, none of them wanting to be the first to speak. In 400 years, the Vorthane Empire had conquered over 300 worlds. Every single one of those conquests had begun the same way. An ultimatum, a show of overwhelming force, and a surrender. No species had ever fought back with real success. A few had tried token resistance, throwing outdated ships or ground forces against the Empire's advanced technology, only to be crushed within hours. This was different. This was the first time in 4 centuries that a supposedly primitive species had won an engagement. Someone gave them technology, Threxen Vow finally said. This is the only explanation. Perhaps a rival empire, seeking to slow our expansion. Perhaps a rogue trading fleet, selling weapons for profit. Humans could not have developed ships capable of matching our own on their own. It is simply not possible for a species this young. Grand Marshal, said Admiral Cressa Iolin, the commander of the main invasion fleet, speaking for the first time. Does it matter where the technology came from? What matters is what we do next. Our orders are clear. If they refuse to surrender, we destroy them. The deadline is in less than 60 hours. Threxen Vow turned to face her. Cressa Iolin was one of his most trusted officers, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, known for her cold, calculating approach to warfare. If anyone in his command staff could offer a clear path forward, it would be her. What is the status of the main fleet? He asked. 200 warships, Grand Marshal. Cruisers, destroyers, and 8 capital ships, including the Endless Dominion. Along with support vessels, troop transports, and orbital bombardment platforms, this is more than enough force to destroy any fleet the humans could possibly have built, regardless of where they got their technology. Threxen Vow nodded slowly. 200 warships. It was an overwhelming force, more than enough to crush most star systems into submission within hours. And yet, something about the report from Vecdoran's scout fleet troubled him deeply. The humans had not just won. They had won decisively, efficiently, with a coordination that suggested extensive training and preparation. Send word to the rest of the fleet, he said finally. We move at full strength, immediately. No more scouting missions. No more waiting for the deadline to expire. If this species has built a war fleet capable of defeating our forces, then we destroy that fleet before it can grow any stronger. We do not give them time to prepare further. Understood, Grand Marshal, Cressa Iolin said, already turning to relay the orders. As his officers moved to prepare the fleet for departure, Threxen Vow remained still, staring at the star map that showed the location of the small blue planet called Earth. Something told him that this campaign would not be as simple as the 300 that had come before it. He did not yet know how right he was. Back on Earth, the mood in the Iron Root Command Center had shifted from cautious hope to grim determination. Admiral Chen stood before the massive tactical display, watching as Arya processed the data gathered from the captured Vorthane scout ship. What have we learned? Chen asked. A great deal, Admiral, Arya replied. The captured ship's computer core contained detailed records of Vorthane fleet composition, standard battle tactics, and historical conquest patterns. Based on this data, and the transmission intercepted from the fleeing scout ships, I estimate the Empire will respond with their full invasion force within the next 48 hours, rather than waiting for the original deadline to expire. They're moving up the timeline, General Webb said grimly. Makes sense. If I found out my target could actually fight back, I wouldn't wait around either. How large is their main fleet? Chen asked. Based on standard Vorthane invasion protocols and the size of the scout fleet we encountered, I estimate between 150 and 250 warships, including several capital-class vessels, significantly larger than our own flagship, Arya said. This is a conservative estimate. The true number could be higher. The room fell silent. Even with the fleet they had built, even with 40 years of preparation, the numbers were daunting. 42 capital ships against a fleet that could be more than 5 times their size. We're not going to win a straight fight against those numbers, Dr. Nwosu said quietly, not ship for ship. No, Chen agreed. But we don't have to win a straight fight. We built this fleet with the assumption that we would always be outnumbered. Every tactic, every strategy we've trained for the last 6 years, assumes we are the smaller force. Arya, pull up the defense plan. The tactical display shifted, showing a complex web of defensive positions surrounding Earth, the Moon, and the orbital shipyards. Mines, hidden defense platforms, choke points designed to funnel an attacking fleet into kill zones where human ships could concentrate their firepower. The plan has always been the same, Chen continued, addressing the room. We do not meet them in open space where their numbers give them the advantage. We draw them into the defensive network we've spent years building. We use the terrain, the gravity wells, the hidden platforms, to even the odds. And we make every single shot count. Yuki Tanaka, who had overseen the design of much of that defensive network, stepped forward. The outer defense line is centered around 3 choke points: the approach through the asteroid belt, the gravitational shear zone near Jupiter, and the direct approach through cislunar space. If the Empire comes in with a large fleet, they will most likely take the most direct route, straight through cislunar space, confident in their numbers. That plays directly into our hands. And if they're smarter than that? General Webb asked. If they split their forces, or approach from multiple directions? Then we adapt, Chen said. We have contingencies for every approach vector we could reasonably predict. But Webb is right to raise the question. This Grand Marshal, Threxen Vow, is not a fool. He commands an empire that has conquered 300 worlds. We cannot assume he will make our job easy. Arya's voice cut through the room, calm as always. Admiral, there is another factor to consider. The Vorthane Empire operates a wide sensor and communication network across this region of space. Other species, client races and observer factions allied with or subject to the Empire, will likely become aware of this conflict very quickly. How humanity performs in this battle may determine how the wider galaxy views us going forward, for better or for worse. Chen absorbed this for a moment. It was not just about winning the battle. It was about the message that victory, or defeat, would send to a galaxy full of species who had never known humanity existed until a few days ago. Then we'd better win convincingly, she said. 41 hours later, sensors across the outer solar system began lighting up with contact after contact. The Vorthane main invasion fleet had arrived, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, in a formation so vast it seemed to blot out the stars behind it. 212 warships, arranged in a massive defensive sphere around 8 enormous capital ships, moved steadily toward the inner solar system. In the command center at Iron Root, the room fell into tense silence as the full scale of the invasion force became clear on the tactical display. My God, General Webb muttered, staring at the sheer number of contacts filling the screen. Arya, confirm the count, Chen said, her voice steady, despite the knot forming in her stomach. Confirmed, Admiral. 212 warships. 8 capital-class vessels, including what appears to be the Grand Marshal's flagship, significantly larger than the others. Estimated total firepower exceeds our own fleet by a factor of approximately 6. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to remain calm. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Every simulation, every training exercise, every sleepless night spent poring over tactical plans, all of it led to this single point in time. Fleet-wide alert, she said. All ships to battle stations. Activate the defense network. Captain Okafor, are you ready? On the bridge of the Endeavor. Okafor watched the same tactical display, his crew moving with practiced efficiency around him. He thought about the message he had given his fleet before the scout battle, about fighting not for glory, but for everyone on the planet below. That feeling had only grown stronger in the hours since. We're ready, Admiral, he said. Position the fleet according to the defense plan. Draw them into the cislunar corridor. The human fleet began to move, sliding into position along the edges of the vast, invisible network of defenses that had taken years to build. Hidden mines, disguised as harmless debris, waited silently in the paths the Vorthane fleet would most likely take. Defense platforms, camouflaged against the darkness of space, powered up their weapon systems, ready to unleash devastating fire the moment the enemy came within range. And the human fleet itself, smaller but faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Vorthane arsenal, prepared to strike from angles the enemy would never expect. Aboard the Endless Dominion, Grand Marshal Threxen Vow watched his own tactical display, noting with something between curiosity and mild concern that the human fleet had positioned itself in a strange, defensive formation near their moon, rather than spreading out to defend the entire system. "They're consolidating their forces," Admiral Cressa Iolan observed, "a defensive posture, predictable, given their numerical disadvantage." "Do not underestimate them," Threxen Vow warned. "They defeated Vecdoran's scout fleet with efficiency. I have not seen from a species this young in 4 centuries of conquest. Proceed with caution. Standard formation. Direct approach through the most efficient route toward their primary defensive position." It was exactly the decision the human defense plan had hoped for. As the massive Vorthane fleet began its approach through cislunar space, directly toward the heart of the defensive network Yuki Tanaka and her team had spent years designing, Admiral Chen watched the enemy ships slide, almost gracefully, into the trap that had been laid for them. "They're taking the bait," she said quietly. "Arya, time until they enter the kill zone?" 18 minutes at their current velocity, Admiral." Chen turned to the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, all platforms, hold position and hold fire until my order. Let them come to us." The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. On every human ship, crews watched their displays, hearts pounding, hands steady despite the fear that gripped nearly everyone in the fleet. This was not a training simulation. This was not a drill. 212 enemy warships were bearing down on Earth, and the fate of the entire planet rested on a defensive plan that had never been tested in real combat. As the leading edge of the Vorthane fleet crossed into the range of the hidden defense platforms, Admiral Chen's voice rang out across the fleet, steady and clear. "All platforms, all ships, fire." The darkness of space erupted into light. Dozens of hidden defense platforms, camouflaged for years against detection, opened fire simultaneously, their weapons tearing into the unsuspecting Vorthane ships that had wandered directly into their prepared kill zone. At the same moment, mines disguised as harmless debris detonated in a coordinated wave, catching several Vorthane cruisers completely off guard. On the bridge of the Endless Dominion, alarms blared as Threxen Vow watched, stunned, as nearly a dozen of his ships were destroyed or crippled in the opening seconds of the ambush. "Report," he demanded. "Grand Marshal." "We've walked into a prepared defensive network," Cressa Iolan said, her voice tight with controlled shock. "Hidden platforms, mines, an entire kill zone we had no indication existed. Casualties across the fleet, multiple ships disabled or destroyed. Evasive action, all ships," Threxen Vow ordered, his composure returning, despite the chaos unfolding around him. "Spread formation. Target those hidden platforms. We still outnumber them significantly. This is a setback, not a defeat." The Vorthane fleet began to react, breaking formation, spreading out to reduce the effectiveness of the ambush, returning fire against the defense platforms that had caught them so completely by surprise. But the damage had already been done. In the opening minutes of the true battle for Earth, the Vorthane Empire had lost more ships than in any single engagement in the previous 400 years of conquest. And now, the human fleet itself began to move, sliding out from behind the cover of the moon, weapons charged, ready to press the advantage that the ambush had given them. "All ships engage," Admiral Chen ordered. "Concentrate fire on the capital ships, fighter squadrons, target their point defense systems, and clear the way for torpedo runs. This is it, everyone. Show them what Earth can do." Captain Okafor gripped the arms of his command chair as the Endeavor surged forward, leading the charge of the human fleet into the heart of the chaos. Around him, dozens of human warships followed, their weapon systems blazing, their pilots flying with a skill and coordination that came from years of preparation for exactly this moment. The battle for Earth had truly begun, and for the first time in 400 years, the outcome was far from certain. The battle raged on for hours, filling the space between Earth and the moon with wreckage, fire, and the constant flash of weapons fire. What had begun as a devastating ambush had settled into a brutal, grinding fight, as the Vorthane fleet, despite its losses, brought its overwhelming numbers to bear against the smaller human force. Aboard the Endeavor, Captain Okafor watched the tactical display with growing concern. The initial ambush had destroyed or disabled nearly 30 enemy ships, an unprecedented result that had shocked the Vorthane commanders. But the Empire still had over 180 warships in the fight, and their superior numbers were beginning to tell. "Captain, the 3rd Squadron is taking heavy fire," Lieutenant Anand reported, her voice tight with tension. "They've lost the Resolute, and the Vigilant is critically damaged." Okafor felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Every ship lost was a crew of hundreds, people he had trained alongside, people who had believed in this mission as deeply as he did. But there was no time to mourn, not yet. Not while the battle still hung in the balance. "Redirect the 5th Squadron to support them," he ordered, "and get me a status update on the capital ship engagement." On the far side of the battle, the largest human capital ships, including the Endeavour, were locked in a desperate struggle against the Vorthane's 8 capital-class vessels, each one nearly twice the size of anything in the human fleet. The Endless Dominion itself, Grand Marshal Threxen Vao's flagship, had proven to be a nightmare to engage. Its shields far stronger than anything human sensors had predicted, its weapons capable of tearing through human armor with terrifying ease. "Admiral," Arya's voice came through to Chen, at the Iron Root Command Center. "The flagship's shield technology is more advanced than our estimates suggested. Conventional weapons fire is having minimal effect. I recommend redirecting the torpedo squadrons to focus exclusively on the Endless Dominion, using coordinated strikes to overwhelm its shield capacity in a single location." Chen nodded, relaying the order immediately. "Captain Okafor, concentrate all torpedo fire on the flagship's forward shield quadrant. If we can knock out Threxen Vao's command ship, it may throw the rest of their fleet into disarray." Okafor received the order and immediately began coordinating with the surrounding human capital ships. It was a dangerous gambit, exposing multiple ships to the flagship's devastating firepower in order to concentrate their own attack. But if it worked, it could turn the tide of the entire battle. "All torpedo squadrons, target the Endless Dominion. Forward shields," Okafor ordered. "Fire on my mark, all at once. We only get one good shot at this before they adjust their defenses." Dozens of torpedo bays across the human fleet opened, missiles arming and locking onto their target. Okafor watched the countdown on his display, his heart pounding in his chest. Fire. A wave of torpedoes launched simultaneously from a dozen different ships, converging on the forward shields of the Endless Dominion. In a coordinated strike that the Vorthane point defense systems, despite their sophistication, struggled to fully intercept. The shields flared bright white, absorbing impact after impact, straining under the concentrated assault. On the bridge of the Endless Dominion, alarms screamed as the shield generators began to overload. "Forward shields at 30% and falling," an officer shouted. Threxen Vao's grip tightened on the arm of his command chair. He had led this empire's forces into 300 conquests, and never once had he seen an enemy fleet coordinate an attack with such precision against his own flagship. This was not the disorganized resistance of a primitive species. This was calculated, disciplined warfare. "Divert power from secondary systems to reinforce the forward shields," he ordered, "and signal the rest of the fleet to converge on our position. I want those torpedo-launching ships destroyed before they can reload." The Vorthane fleet responded immediately, dozens of warships breaking off from their engagements elsewhere in the battle to swarm toward the human ships that had targeted the flagship. It was a dangerous moment, and Admiral Chen, watching from Iron Root, recognized the risk immediately. "They're converging on our torpedo ships," she said. "Captain Okafor, pull back, don't let them encircle you." "Understood, Admiral," Okafor replied, already giving the order to disengage. "All ships, fall back to the secondary defense line, cover our retreat with fighter squadrons." As the human capital ships began a controlled withdrawal, the fighter squadrons that had been supporting the main fleet swept in, engaging the pursuing Vorthane warships in a series of fast, brutal dogfights. Small, nimble human fighters, flown by pilots who had trained for years in simulated combat, danced around the larger, less maneuverable Vorthane ships, picking off engines and weapon systems with precise, targeted fire. Among those pilots was Lieutenant Diego Ramirez, callsign Hawk, flying one of the lead fighters in the 4th Squadron. He had grown up in a small town in Mexico, dreaming of becoming an astronaut, never imagining that his skills would one day be used to defend the entire planet from an alien invasion. Multiple bandits closing on the Endeavor. "Flank," his wingman called out over the comm. "We need to intercept, now." "On it," Ramirez replied, throwing his fighter into a tight, spiraling dive that brought him directly into the path of 3 pursuing Vorthane fighters. His weapon systems locked onto the lead enemy craft, and he fired a burst of precision energy weapons fire that tore through its engine housing, sending it spiraling out of control into the darkness of space. The battle continued in this chaotic, brutal fashion for what felt like an eternity to everyone involved, though in reality, it had been only a few hours since the first shots were fired. Ships on both sides burned and broke apart, their wreckage scattering into orbit around Earth, a grim monument to the cost of this unprecedented conflict. Back at Iron Root, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with a growing sense of dread. Despite the successful ambush, despite the coordinated strike against the flagship, the sheer numbers of the Vorthane fleet were beginning to overwhelm the human defenses. Arya's voice cut through the tension in the command center. "Admiral, current projections show our fleet sustaining unsustainable losses if the battle continues at this rate. We have lost 11 capital ships and 43 escort vessels. The Vorthane fleet has lost approximately 61 warships, but their remaining force still outnumbers ours by a significant margin." Chen felt the weight of every single one of those losses pressing down on her. 11 capital ships, thousands of lives. And the battle was far from over. "What are our options?" General Webb asked, his face grim. "We have one significant advantage remaining," Arya said. "The secondary defense network, positioned near the Jupiter gravitational shear zone, has not yet been activated. If we can lure a significant portion of the remaining Vorthane fleet into that zone, the extreme gravitational distortions will severely limit their maneuverability and shield effectiveness, while our own ships, equipped with modified inertial dampeners, can operate with far greater freedom." "That's a long way to draw them," Dr. Nwosu said. "We'd need to convince them to chase us out there, away from Earth." "Precisely," Arya said. "I propose a controlled, feigned retreat. If Captain Okafor's remaining forces withdraw toward the outer system in a manner that appears desperate and disorganized, Vorthane doctrine, based on the data recovered from the captured scout ship, strongly favors aggressive pursuit of a retreating enemy. Grand Marshal Threxen Vow is likely to commit a significant portion of his remaining fleet to finish us off, believing the battle already won." Chen considered this for a long moment. It was a massive gamble, one that risked exposing the retreating human ships to annihilation if the plan failed, or if Threxen Vow proved too cautious to take the bait. But the alternative, continuing to fight a losing battle of attrition near Earth, seemed even more likely to end in disaster. "Get me Captain Okafor," she said. A moment later, Okafor's face appeared on the screen, streaked with sweat, his uniform singed at the collar, from a near miss earlier in the battle. "Admiral," he said. "James, I need you to trust me on something," Chen said. "I need your fleet to retreat toward Jupiter. And I need it to look real, disorganized, desperate, like you're running for your lives." Okafor's eyes narrowed slightly, understanding immediately what she was asking. "You want to draw them into the shear zone." "Exactly. Arya believes it's our best chance to even the odds. But it means convincing an enemy commander who has already seen us fight with discipline and coordination that we've suddenly fallen apart. It's a big ask." Okafor was silent for a moment, glancing at the tactical display showing the brutal losses his fleet had already sustained. "Admiral, at the rate we're losing ships, in another 2 hours, we won't need to fake a desperate retreat. It'll be real." He took a breath. "We'll make it convincing. Give me the coordinates and the timing. Aboard the Endless Dominion." Grand Marshal Threxen Vow watched with grim satisfaction as the human fleet, which had fought with such surprising discipline in the opening hours of the battle, began to show signs of breaking. Ships peeled away from the main formation in ragged, uncoordinated patterns, retreating toward the outer edges of the solar system. "They're falling apart," Admiral Cressa Iolin observed. "Their losses have finally caught up with them. Shall we press the advantage and finish them before they can regroup?" Threxen Vow studied the retreating human ships carefully. Something about the pattern of their withdrawal nagged at him, a lingering suspicion born from the earlier ambush that had cost him so dearly. But his own losses were mounting as well, and the temptation to end this battle decisively, before the humans could regroup and mount another surprising defense, was powerful. "Commit the second and third battle groups to pursuit," he ordered finally. "Destroy their fleet, before it can retreat to whatever hidden shipyard produced these ships in the first place. I want this war ended today." Nearly 80 Vorthane warships broke off from the main battle and surged forward, pursuing the retreating human fleet toward the outer solar system, toward Jupiter, and toward a trap that Grand Marshal Threxen Vow did not yet know he was walking into. As the pursuing fleet crossed the threshold into the Jupiter gravitational shear zone, an area of space distorted by the massive planet's gravity, in ways that played havoc with standard shield and sensor technology, Admiral Chen gave the order that would determine the fate of the entire battle. "Now," she said, "activate the secondary defense network. All ships, turn and engage." The retreating human fleet, which had never truly been in disarray at all, snapped back into disciplined formation with startling speed. Hidden defense platforms within the shear zone, specially modified to function despite the gravitational distortions, opened fire on the surprised Vorthane pursuit force. And the human capital ships, their inertial dampeners specifically calibrated for these exact conditions, turned to fight with a speed and precision that the disoriented Vorthane ships, struggling with malfunctioning shields and sensors in the distorted gravity field, simply could not match. On the bridge of the endless dominion, Threxen Vow watched in cold, mounting horror as the reports came flooding in, ship after ship reporting critical damage, shield failures, and losses that far exceeded anything the ambush near Earth had inflicted. "Grand Marshal," Cressa Island said, her voice for the first time betraying genuine alarm, "we're losing the second and third battle groups. The gravitational distortion is crippling our shields and sensors. This was a trap." Threxen Vow's 6 eyes narrowed, with a fury that had been building since the very first report of the scout fleet's defeat. "Recall them immediately. All remaining ships, full withdrawal from the shear zone," but the order came too late for many of the pursuing ships. By the time the shattered remains of the second and third battle groups managed to disengage and retreat back toward the main fleet, they had lost another 43 warships, a devastating blow that brought the Vorthane Empire's total losses in this single battle to over 100 ships, more than the Empire had lost in the previous 50 years of conquest combined. In the Iron Root Command Center, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with a mixture of relief and exhaustion as the numbers updated in real time. The human fleet had suffered grievous losses of its own, over half of the original 42 capital ships either destroyed or critically damaged. But the Vorthane invasion force, once an overwhelming 212 warships strong, had been reduced to barely 60 vessels still capable of combat. "Admiral," Arya said, "the Vorthane fleet is withdrawing toward the outer system. Based on their remaining strength and the severity of their losses, I estimate a very high probability that Grand Marshal Threxen Vow will choose to disengage entirely, rather than risk further catastrophic losses against an enemy that has now defeated his forces twice in a single engagement." Chen allowed herself a small, tired smile, the first genuine moment of relief she had felt since the crisis began. "Let's see if you're right." Across the battered remains of both fleets, a tense silence settled over the battlefield, as both sides assessed the staggering cost of the fighting. For the first time in 400 years, the Vorthane Galactic Empire had not simply lost a battle, it had been humiliated, twice, by a species it had judged too primitive to pose any real threat. And somewhere among the drifting wreckage and dying ships, Grand Marshal Threxen Vow was about to make a decision that would echo across the entire galaxy for generations to come. Grand Marshal Threxen Vow stood alone in his private quarters aboard the battered endless dominion, staring out at the stars through a reinforced viewport. Behind him, on the desk, sat a datapad filled with casualty reports that made his stomach turn, with a feeling he had not experienced in centuries of service to the Empire: doubt. 61 warships lost in the initial ambush, 43 more destroyed in the disaster at the Jupiter shear zone. Combined with damaged vessels limping back toward the fleet's rally point, his once mighty invasion force of 212 ships had been reduced to barely 58 combat-capable warships. In a single engagement, he had lost more ships and more lives than in any campaign in the recorded history of the Vorthane Empire. A chime sounded at his door. "Enter," he said. Admiral Cressa Yulin stepped inside, her posture stiff, her expression carefully neutral. In the way of an officer delivering news she knew her commander did not want to hear. "Grand Marshal, the fleet has regrouped at the rally point beyond the asteroid belt. We have confirmed 58 ships remain combat capable. I have also received a priority transmission from the Imperial Council." Threxen Vow turned from the viewport. "What do they want?" "They want answers, Grand Marshal. Word of this defeat has already begun to spread through the client networks. Several of our vassal species are asking questions. There are concerns about the stability of the Empire's reputation if this is not addressed swiftly and decisively." Threxen Vow's jaw tightened. He had feared this exact outcome from the moment the first scout report reached him. In an empire built on 400 years of unbroken military dominance, the mere perception of weakness could be as dangerous as the weakness itself. If word spread that a young, primitive species had fought the Vorthane military to a standstill and inflicted catastrophic losses, other vassal worlds might begin to question their own submission. Rebellion, dormant for centuries under the crushing weight of Vorthane power, could reawaken across dozens of systems. "What are my orders from the Council?" he asked. "They have authorized the deployment of the Third Home Fleet, Grand Marshal. 140 additional warships, including 3 of our newest Dreadnought-class vessels. They are prepared to end this matter permanently, regardless of the cost." Threxen Vow felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The Third Home Fleet was one of the Empire's most powerful reserve forces, rarely deployed, except in matters of the gravest importance. Its commitment to this campaign signaled that the Imperial Council no longer viewed the conquest of Earth as a routine matter, but as a critical test of the Empire's authority itself. "And what of my command?" he asked quietly. "Do I still lead this campaign, or has the Council decided I have failed?" Cressa Yulin hesitated before answering. "You retain command, Grand Marshal, for now, but the Council has made it clear that a third defeat will not be tolerated. They have also dispatched an observer to report directly on the conduct of this campaign." Threxen Vow understood the implication immediately. An observer meant the Council no longer fully trusted his judgment. If this next engagement ended in failure, it would not just be his career that ended, it would likely be his life. "Very well," he said, straightening his shoulders. "We wait for the Third Home Fleet to arrive, and then we finish this. No more underestimating them. No more direct approaches into obvious defensive positions. This time, we study their tactics, their technology, and we adapt." Back on Earth, the aftermath of the battle was being felt in every corner of the planet. News of the victory, incomplete and confused as it initially was, had spread like wildfire across every continent. People who had spent days in terror, believing the end of the world was at hand, now watched footage and reports of a human fleet that had fought off an alien invasion force, and won, twice, against overwhelming odds. But at Ironroot, the mood was far more somber than the celebrations breaking out across the planet's cities. Admiral Chen stood in the command center, reviewing the true cost of the battle with the rest of the Ironroot Council. "Final casualty figures," General Webb said grimly, reading from a datapad. "We lost 23 capital ships, out of the original 42. 161 escort vessels and fighters destroyed. Total personnel losses across the fleet, 11,412. The number hung heavy in the room. 11,412 people, trained for decades, dedicated their lives to defending a planet that, until a few days ago, had no idea they even existed. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the full weight of that loss before pushing forward, because the war was far from over. "Arya," she said, "what's our current status?" "Admiral, the surviving fleet consists of 19 capital ships and approximately 214 escort and fighter craft, many requiring significant repair. Shipyard facilities on the far side of the moon are currently operating at maximum capacity, but full repairs and the construction of new vessels will take considerable time, estimated at several weeks for critical repairs and several months for meaningful reinforcement of our numbers." "And the Vorthane fleet?" Chen asked. "Sensor data and intercepted communications suggests the remaining Vorthane forces have withdrawn to a rally point beyond the asteroid belt, likely awaiting reinforcement. Based on historical patterns of Empire behavior when facing unexpected resistance, I estimate a high probability that additional forces will be deployed within the next 7 to 14 days. Dr. Nwosu leaned forward, her expression tense. We can't rebuild our fleet to full strength in that time. If they come back with an even larger force, we may not survive a third engagement. There is another factor to consider, Arya said. Intercepted Vorthane communications, though heavily encrypted, suggest significant unrest is developing among several client species within Empire space. Our victory, incomplete as our losses were, appears to be having ripple effects far beyond this solar system. Several vassal worlds are reportedly reducing tribute shipments and troop contributions to the Empire, citing what they describe as operational uncertainty. Chen absorbed this information carefully. You're saying our fight isn't just about Earth anymore? Correct, Admiral. Whether by intention or accident, humanity's resistance has become a symbol to species across Empire space who have long resented Vorthane rule, but lacked the means or the courage to resist. This could work in our favor, if we can find a way to leverage it. Several of these client species possess significant military and technological resources of their own. President Vasquez, who had been listening quietly from her seat at the table, finally spoke. Are you suggesting we try to make contact with these species? Form some kind of alliance? It is a possibility worth exploring, Madam President, Arya replied. The captured Vorthane scout ship's computer core contains extensive records of client species, their locations, and in several cases, secure communication protocols used for internal Empire administration. If we can reach out to species who share an interest in weakening Vorthane control, we may find allies willing to support our defense, whether through direct military assistance, intelligence sharing, or simply diplomatic pressure on the Empire itself. Chen considered this for a long moment. It was a bold, risky plan, reaching out to unknown species across the galaxy, hoping that shared resentment of the Vorthane Empire would be enough to forge some kind of alliance. But given the numbers Arya had projected for a potential third engagement, bold and risky might be exactly what humanity needed. Do it, she said. Arya, use the data from the captured ship to identify the most promising candidates for contact. Prioritize species with military capability and a documented history of resistance to Empire rule. We need allies, and we need them fast. 3 days later, deep within a star system nearly 40 light-years from Earth, a small human diplomatic vessel, hastily converted from one of the fleet's fastest reconnaissance ships, dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a planet inhabited by a species known as the Dravnir. According to the captured Vorthane records, the Dravnir had been conquered by the Empire nearly 150 years earlier and had a long history of quiet resistance against their occupiers. Aboard the ship, diplomatic envoy Dr. Elena Osei, a former United Nations negotiator who had spent the last decade as part of the secret Iron Root diplomatic corps, prepared to make what might be the most important first contact in human history, aside from the encounter with the Empire itself. Transmission ready, said the ship's communications officer, broadcasting the peaceful contact protocol Arya prepared, using the translated Dravnir language patterns from the captured records. Send it, Osei said, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. The message went out, careful and respectful, introducing humanity as a species that had recently resisted Vorthane conquest and expressing interest in peaceful communication with the people of this system. For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then, finally, a signal came back, and a holographic image flickered to life on the ship's small display. The being that appeared was tall and slender, with mottled blue-green skin and large, expressive eyes that studied Osei with obvious caution. You are the species that defeated the Vorthane fleet, the being said, its translated voice carrying a note of disbelief. We had heard rumors, but did not believe them. I am Counselor Thessaly Namara, of the Dravnir Assembly. You say you wish to speak with us. Why? Oh, we are a young species, Counselor. We did not seek this conflict, but we will not surrender our world to the Empire. We understand that your people have also suffered under Vorthane rule for many years. We hope that we might find common cause, for mutual defense and mutual benefit. Counselor Namara was silent for a long moment, her large eyes studying Osei's image with an intensity that made the human envoy distinctly uncomfortable. "The Empire has ruled over my people for 153 years, she said finally. "In that time, no one has ever fought back and survived, let alone won. Many of my people believed such resistance was simply impossible. Your victory, small as it may be in the grand scope of Empire power, has given some among my people hope. A dangerous thing, hope, when the Empire's retribution against rebellion has historically been swift and merciless. We understand the risk we're asking you to consider," Osei said. "We're not asking for an immediate declaration of open rebellion. Even limited support, intelligence, resources, technology, anything that might help us survive the Empire's next attack, would be deeply appreciated. And in turn, we would be honored to support your people's own aspirations, whatever form that support might eventually take." Another long silence followed, and Osei found herself holding her breath, aware that the outcome of this conversation could shape the entire course of humanity's war for survival. "I cannot speak for the entire Dravnir Assembly," Councillor Namara said finally, "but I will bring your request before the full council, and I will argue in favor of assistance. Your fight against the Empire, whatever its ultimate outcome, has already changed something in this region of space. Many are watching closely to see what happens next." Over the following days, similar conversations played out across multiple star systems, as human diplomatic teams, guided by Arya's careful analysis of the captured Vorthane records, made contact with several other client species long chafing under Empire rule. Not every conversation ended positively. Some species, too afraid of Vorthane retribution, refused any contact at all. One particularly hostile encounter nearly resulted in the destruction of a human diplomatic ship before it managed to retreat to safety. But slowly, cautiously, a fragile network of sympathetic contacts began to form, species willing to share information, and in a few remarkable cases, even limited technological or material support. Back at Ironroot, Admiral Chen watched as the intelligence gathered from these new alliances began to paint a clearer picture of what humanity would face in the coming battle. The Vorthane Third Home Fleet, 140 warships strong, including 3 massive dreadnought-class vessels, far larger than anything the Empire had deployed before, was indeed being mobilized, exactly as Arya had predicted. "The dreadnoughts are the real concern," Yuki Tanaka said, studying the technical specifications provided by one of the newly contacted allied species, a mechanically inclined race, known as the Korvath, who had once served as shipbuilders for the Empire, before a partial rebellion decades earlier had earned them a heavily restricted, closely watched status within Empire space. According to the Korvath data, each dreadnought carries firepower equivalent to nearly 15 of our capital ships. Their shields alone would take a coordinated strike from our entire remaining fleet, just to bring down on a single vessel. "Then we can't fight them ship to ship," Chen said. "We need another way." "The Korvath have shared something else," Arya interjected. "Detailed schematics of the dreadnought-class vessels, including a critical vulnerability in their power core containment system, discovered during the Empire's own testing phase decades ago, and never fully resolved due to cost concerns. A precisely targeted strike against this vulnerability, delivered before the shields can fully compensate, could potentially disable or destroy a dreadnought with a fraction of the firepower normally required." Chen felt a spark of cautious hope ignite in her chest, for the first time since the devastating losses of the last battle. "Can we build weapons capable of exploiting this vulnerability?" "With the Korvath's assistance, yes," Arya confirmed. "They have offered to provide both the technical expertise and limited material support to modify a portion of our fleet's weapon systems. It will not be simple, and it will not be quick, but it is achievable within the time frame before the Third Home Fleet is expected to arrive." Admiral Chen looked around the room at the exhausted but determined faces of the Ironroot Council, and beyond them, in her mind's eye, at the 11,412 names that represented the cost humanity had already paid in this war. The Empire was gathering its full strength for a third, final assault, one that would either crush humanity's resistance completely, or mark the beginning of the end for Vorthane dominance across an entire region of the galaxy. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We have a war to win." 12 days after the devastating battle that had shocked the entire Vorthane Empire, the Third Home Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 140 warships, including 3 massive dreadnought-class vessels, moved through the darkness of space, with grim, methodical precision. This time, there would be no direct charge into an obvious trap. Grand Marshal Threxen Vow had learned from his earlier mistakes, and he intended to make sure this battle ended with the total destruction of humanity's ability to resist. Aboard the Endless Dominion, now repaired and reinforced, with additional shielding hastily fitted after the previous engagement, Threxen Vow studied the tactical display with the newly arrived Imperial observer, a cold, calculating official named Vex Ordain, standing silently at his side. Our sensors show the human fleet remains near their moon, in a defensive posture similar to before, Cressa Iolan reported. However, our long-range scans detect significantly fewer active warships than in the previous engagement. It appears they have not fully recovered from their losses. Do not assume weakness, Threxen Vow warned, remembering the costly lesson of underestimating this species twice already. Deploy reconnaissance drones ahead of the main fleet. I want a complete picture of their defensive network before we commit to any approach vector. We will not walk into another ambush. Vex Ordain spoke for the first time, his voice cold and measured. The Council expects results, Grand Marshal, not further caution. Every day this campaign drags on. More client worlds grow restless. There have already been 3 minor uprisings across the outer territories, inspired, we believe, by rumors of this world's resistance. I am aware of the stakes, Observer, Threxen Vow replied, his patience thin, but his discipline holding firm. Caution and results are not mutually exclusive. A third defeat would embolden every rebellious system in Empire space, far more than a few additional days of careful preparation. The reconnaissance drones swept forward, and this time, thanks to modifications made using data recovered from the earlier engagements, they successfully detected the outline of several hidden defense platforms near the moon, though not their exact number or full capability. Threxen Vow studied the resulting map carefully, formulating a new strategy that avoided the most obvious kill zones, while still bringing the Empire's overwhelming firepower to bear. We will approach from 2 vectors simultaneously, he announced to his assembled commanders. The main fleet, including the dreadnoughts, will take a wide approach around the detected defense platforms, forcing the humans to either abandon their prepared positions or split their forces to cover both approach angles. The 4th battle group will conduct a secondary approach through the asteroid belt, drawing off whatever reserve forces they might have hidden there. It was a far more sophisticated plan than the direct charge that had led to disaster in the previous engagement, and Admiral Chen, watching the Vorthane fleet's cautious, split approach from the Iron Root Command Center, felt a fresh wave of concern settle over her. They've adapted, she said quietly. Arya, can our current defense network handle a 2-pronged approach? It is significantly more challenging, Admiral, Arya replied. The original defensive plan was optimized for a single, direct approach vector. A split attack reduces the effectiveness of our concentrated ambush strategy considerably. However, the modified weapons systems developed with Korvath assistance remain our strongest asset against the Dreadnought-class vessels, provided we can create the necessary firing opportunities. Chen studied the tactical display, watching the massive Vorthane fleet divide into 2 approaching forces. 19 capital ships, many still not fully repaired from the previous battle, stood between Earth and an enemy force that outnumbered them more than 7-to-1 in raw ship count, even before accounting for the overwhelming individual power of the 3 dreadnoughts. We need every advantage we can get, she said. Status on the Allied support Arya arranged? The Dravnir Assembly has authorized deployment of a support squadron, General Webb reported, reading from an update that had arrived just hours earlier. 12 warships, older designs but still combat-capable, currently en route and expected to arrive within 6 hours, before the main battle is likely to begin. The Korvath have also confirmed a small technical support team is standing by remotely to assist with real-time targeting adjustments for the modified weapons systems. It was not nearly enough to close the massive gap in raw numbers, but it was more support than humanity had ever received from beyond its own solar system, and Chen felt a fierce, quiet pride at what her species had managed to build in less than 2 weeks of desperate diplomacy and preparation. Then we use everything we have, she said. Prepare the fleet. This is the battle that decides everything. The battle began just past dawn, over the Pacific Ocean, though in the vacuum of space beyond the moon, there was no dawn at all. Only the harsh, unblinking light of distant stars and the terrible glow of weapons fire, about to be unleashed once more. Captain Okafor, still recovering from injuries sustained in the previous engagement, insisted on returning to the bridge of the repaired Endeavor. Unwilling to let anyone else lead the fleet into what might be humanity's final battle for survival. "All ships, hold position," he ordered, watching the two Vorthane battle groups approach from different angles on the tactical display. "Let them commit before we reveal our full disposition." The larger Vorthane force, including the 3 dreadnoughts, swept wide around the detected human defense platforms, exactly as Threx and Vow had planned. The smaller 4th battle group pushed through the asteroid belt, probing for any hidden reserves the humans might have stationed there. "Admiral, the asteroid belt approach is entering range of our secondary defense platforms," Arya reported to Chen. "Shall we engage?" Chen hesitated only a moment. Springing that trap now would reveal the location and capability of their remaining hidden defenses, information that would be relayed immediately to the larger, more dangerous force approaching from the other angle. But allowing the 4th battle group to pass unchallenged risked exposing the fleet to attack from 2 directions simultaneously. Partial engagement only, she decided, enough to blunt their advance and force a retreat, but hold back at least a third of the platforms in reserve. "We may need every surprise we can manage before this day is over." The order went out, and the hidden platforms near the asteroid belt opened fire on the approaching 4th battle group, inflicting heavy damage and forcing a hasty retreat after the loss of 11 Vorthane warships. It was a smaller victory than the devastating ambush of the first battle, but it succeeded in its primary goal, eliminating the threat from one approach vector while preserving a portion of the human fleet's remaining surprises. But the larger force, the one carrying the 3 dreadnoughts and the bulk of the 3rd Home Fleet's firepower, continued its wide, cautious approach toward Earth, avoiding the known defensive positions entirely. "Grand Marshal, the secondary force has been repelled with significant losses," Cressa Eolin reported to Threx and Veo aboard the Endless Dominion. "However, our primary approach remains unopposed. We are clear of their detected defense network." "As expected," Threx and Veo said grimly. "They cannot cover every angle with the forces they have remaining. Continue the approach. Prepare for direct engagement with their main fleet." As the massive Vorthane force closed the distance toward the moon, Admiral Chen made the call that would define the outcome of the entire war. "All ships, engage," she ordered. "Captain Okafor, target the dreadnoughts with the modified weapons systems, exactly as we rehearsed. Everyone else, focus on breaking up their escort screen and buying the strike teams the time they need." The human fleet surged forward, smaller and vastly outnumbered, but flying with a discipline and coordination that had already shocked the Vorthane Empire twice before. Captain Okafor guided the Endeavor directly toward the nearest dreadnought, a colossal vessel that dwarfed even the human flagship, its shields glowing with barely visible energy, as it began charging its own devastating main weapon. "Modified torpedo squadrons, stand by," Okafor ordered, watching the targeting solution calculated by Arya and the remote Korvath technical team slowly lock into place on his display. "We only get one clean shot at this before their shields adjust to compensate." Aboard the dreadnought, Vorthane crews scrambled to bring the massive vessel's weapons to bear on the approaching human ships, confident in the near-impenetrable strength of their shields, unaware of the precise vulnerability that Allied intelligence had exposed weeks earlier. "Fire," Okafor commanded. A coordinated volley of modified torpedoes launched from the Endeavor, and 3 supporting cruisers, their guidance systems calibrated to strike a very specific point along the dreadnought's power core containment array, a weakness the Empire itself had known about, but never fully corrected. The torpedoes struck true, punching through the dreadnought's shields at precisely the calculated moment of minimum resistance, detonating deep within the ship's internal structure. For a terrible, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, the dreadnought's hull began to glow from within, cracks of blinding light spreading across its massive surface, before the entire vessel erupted in a catastrophic explosion that lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. On the bridge of the Endless Dominion, Grand Marshal Threxen Vow watched in absolute horror as one of his 3 dreadnoughts, vessels that had never been successfully destroyed in the history of the Vorthane Empire, vanished in a single, devastating strike. "That is not possible," he whispered, his composure finally shattering. "Report. How did they breach the containment shielding?" "Unknown, Grand Marshal," Cressa Iolin replied, her own voice trembling with disbelief. "The strike was too precise to be coincidental. They must have known about the containment vulnerability." Vex Ordain, the Imperial Observer, stepped forward for the first time since the battle began, his expression unreadable. "Someone has been sharing classified Empire technical data with this species, Grand Marshal. This goes beyond simple resistance. This is coordinated sabotage from within our own ranks, or from client species we believed loyal." Threxen Vow felt the full weight of the situation crashing down upon him. Not only had this small, primitive species defeated his forces twice already, but now it appeared they had somehow gained access to closely guarded Imperial secrets, likely through the very client species the Empire had subjugated for centuries. The rot of rebellion, it seemed, had spread far deeper than anyone in the Imperial Council had realized. The battle continued to rage with brutal intensity, but the destruction of the first dreadnought had shattered something fundamental in the confidence of the Vorthane fleet. Human strike teams, coordinated with terrifying precision by Aria and the surviving human capital ships, targeted the second dreadnought with the same devastating tactic, though this time the Vorthane crews, alerted to the danger, managed to partially compensate their shields, resulting in severe damage rather than total destruction. The Dravnir support squadron arrived just as the battle reached its most desperate hour, 12 additional warships joining the fight against the Vorthane escort screen, providing crucial relief to the exhausted, outnumbered human fleet. Their arrival, while militarily significant, carried an even greater symbolic weight. For the first time in 400 years, a client species had openly, actively fought alongside another world, against the Vorthane Empire in open battle. "Grand Marshal," Cressa Iolin reported, her voice now carrying an edge of genuine desperation, "we have lost the first dreadnought entirely, and the second is critically damaged and withdrawing from combat. Our overall fleet has sustained losses exceeding 60 warships. The Dravnir have entered the battle in open support of the humans." Threxen Vow stared at the tactical display, watching 4 centuries of unbroken Vorthane military dominance crumbling before his eyes in the span of a single catastrophic afternoon. The math of the situation was inescapable. Continuing this battle risked losing his final dreadnought and the majority of his remaining fleet, a defeat so total that it would likely trigger uprisings across dozens of client worlds simultaneously, potentially threatening the very foundations of the Empire itself. "Grand Marshal," Vex Ordain said quietly, "the Council must be informed immediately of these developments. This is no longer simply a matter of conquering a single world." Threxen Vow closed his 6 eyes for a long moment, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling upon him. Continuing the fight risked total annihilation of his remaining forces, and potentially the collapse of Empire authority across the region. Withdrawing meant accepting the greatest military humiliation in the recorded history of the Vorthane Empire, a defeat that would embolden rebellious client worlds regardless of the choice he made now. "All remaining ships," he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of 400 years of Imperial pride being set aside, "withdraw from the system. We return to report to the Imperial Council directly. This campaign is over." In the Iron Root Command Center, Admiral Chen watched, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing, as the remaining Vorthane fleet, battered and diminished, began a full retreat from the solar system, gathering their surviving ships and preparing to jump into faster-than-light travel, away from Earth entirely. "Aria, confirm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Confirmed, Admiral. The Vorthane fleet is withdrawing completely. Sensor data shows no indication of a feigned retreat or an intent to regroup for a further attack in the immediate future. Based on the severity of their losses and the confirmed active support from the Dravnir Assembly, I assess a very high probability that the Vorthane Empire will pursue diplomatic or political resolution rather than risk further military engagement, at least in the near term." A wave of exhausted, disbelieving relief swept through the command center. Around the table, hardened military officers and scientists who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment found themselves fighting back tears, embracing each other, unable to fully process the reality that humanity had survived a war against an empire that had conquered 300 worlds. Admiral Chen allowed herself a single, quiet moment to breathe before turning back to the tactical display, her mind already moving toward the enormous work that still lay ahead. "Casualty report," she said softly. "Total losses across both engagements, Admiral," General Webb read, his voice heavy. 29 capital ships, 208 escort vessels and fighters. Total personnel losses, 19,683. The number settled over the room like a physical weight, a stark reminder of the true cost of the freedom they had just secured. Admiral Chen thought of every single name behind that number, every family that would receive terrible news in the coming days, every sacrifice that had made this victory, however incomplete and uncertain the future still remained, possible at all. "We will remember every one of them," she said quietly. "But right now, we have a galaxy that needs to understand exactly what happened here today." In the weeks that followed, the news of humanity's victory spread far beyond Earth, carried by allied client species eager to share word of the Empire's first true defeat in 4 centuries. Diplomatic channels, hastily established during the darkest days of the war, blossomed into genuine relationships between humanity and dozens of species across the region, many of them long suppressed under Vorthane rule, now emboldened by Earth's example to seek their own paths toward greater autonomy. The Vorthane Empire, shaken but far from destroyed, entered into cautious, uneasy negotiations with representatives of Earth, mediated in part by the Dravnir Assembly and several other newly allied species. No one believed the threat was permanently ended. The Empire remained a vast, powerful force spanning hundreds of worlds, and Grand Marshal Threxin Vow, though relieved of his command in the aftermath of the disastrous campaign, was quickly replaced by officers eager to restore imperial pride through renewed aggression. But for the first time since the crashed alien ship had been discovered decades earlier in the Nevada desert, humanity stood not as a hidden secret desperately preparing for an unknown future, but as a recognized power among the stars, respected, feared, and increasingly sought after as an ally, by species who had spent centuries believing that resistance to the Vorthane Empire was simply impossible. Admiral Sarah Chen stood once more before the assembled leaders of Earth's nations, now joined by representatives from the Dravnir Assembly and several other allied species, gathered to discuss the uncertain but hopeful future that lay ahead. "We did not choose this war," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But when it came to our door, we chose to stand and fight rather than kneel. That choice cost us dearly. It cost us thousands of lives, and it will likely cost us more before this conflict with the Empire is truly resolved. But it also proves something that many species across this galaxy had forgotten was possible, that even the mightiest empire can be challenged, and that no world, no matter how young or how small, has to accept a future decided entirely by someone else's terms." Outside, on the surface of a planet that had nearly ceased to exist just weeks earlier, the sun rose over cities filled with people who now understood, for the first time in human history, that they were not alone in the universe, and that the choices their ancestors had made in secret, decades earlier, had given their entire species a fighting chance at a future among the stars. The war for humanity's survival was far from truly over, but for now, for the first time since a six-eyed being had appeared in the sky demanding surrender, Earth was still free, still standing, and still ready to face whatever the galaxy sent next. The end.